In this video, I'm going to remind you of Sybil Birling's story, and I'll answer the question, how does Priestley use dramatic irony so effectively in this sequence? If you find this video content useful, then like, subscribe and ring the bell to receive notifications of our future video releases. Here's a quick recap then. At the start of Act 2, we heard Gerald's account of Daisy Renton, a young woman that the inspector proposes was an alternate identity for Eva Smith, who we heard about in Act 1. In this second part of Act 2, the inspector turns his attention to Mrs. Birling and her involvement with the victim. So finishing off with Gerald, following his interrogation, Sheila remarks that the inspector never showed him the photo of the girl that he showed to her. The inspector takes this opportunity to present a photo to Sybil instead. When she claims not to recognise the girl, the inspector accuses her of lying, an accusation that provokes an angry response from both her and her husband. But Sheila can tell from her mother's reaction that she is indeed lying and warns both of her parents that they should try to avoid making things worse than they already are. The inspector establishes that Mrs. Birling is an important member of the Brumley Women's Charity Organisation and that Eva Smith, or Daisy Renton, appealed for their help only 2 weeks ago. Sybil admits this is true, but that the girl shown to her on the photo did not go by either of those names, Eva Smith or Daisy Renton. She had called herself Mrs. Birling and said that her husband had left her. Now Sybil's called Mrs. Birling, and she thought that the fact the girl had used her own family surname was a show of bad manners, and this led her to feeling prejudice against the case. The girl then had to backpedal and admit that she wasn't really called Mrs. Birling and that her original story was false. Mrs. Birling, the real Mrs. Birling, subsequently used her influence on the charity panel to have the girl's request for support denied. She believes that she did her duty and needn't feel responsible for the outcome. But the inspector confrontationally tells her that she handled the case very badly. The inspector then reveals that the girl, Eva Smith, Daisy Renton, Mrs. Birling, whoever she was going to have a child. Sheila's horrified by this. Birling suspects, based on the previous interrogation of Gerald, that the child might well be Gerald's, but this is denied by the inspector. Sybil tells them what she told the girl. She said, "Go and look for the father of the child. It's his responsibility." The family begin to turn on one another at this point, Birling's primary concern being that this won't reflect well on them at an inquest. His wife reminds him that it was his firing of Eva Smith that set the whole thing off. Mrs. Birling continues with her story. As far as the girl was concerned, there was no question of her marrying the father of her unborn child, since she said he was too immature and she didn't want to take more money from him, which he offered, as she suspected that the cash he had provided already was stolen. Sybil states that she had no more reason to believe the story about the irresponsible partner than the girl's first story about being called Mrs. Birling. The inspector identifies the father as being mostly responsible, to which Sybil agrees. When she says he ought to be dealt with very severely, the identity of the father begins to dawn on Sheila. But not only on Sheila, but on the audience as well. Priestley masterfully lays the clues as the act progresses, that just as the characters begin to solve the puzzle, so do we, the audience. Of course, we may have seen this coming further back in the story if we realised that everyone at the party was going to be interrogated, and the members of the audience who grasped that early on would have had more time to enjoy, if enjoy is the word, the dramatic irony as Sybil Birling inadvertently accuses her own son for being responsible for the girl's death. Eric appears, the curtain falls, and the audience is left on a cliffhanger, excitedly wondering how the play will be concluded in Act 3. If you want this information in written form, then check out our revision guide on the Twinkle website. You can also find a whole load more revision videos on our YouTube channel. Please check those out. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.